So the next ceramics project is to create a double pinch pot. The double pinch pot project is to take two pinch pots that you've created previously. If you're not sure how to make a pinch pot, refer to the video on how to make a pinch pot. You're going to take two pinch pots of the same size. You're going to put those together to create a sphere. So I have a piggy bank as an idea. This is where the traditional comes from. Is the double pinch pot is a sphere, and then you add your parts to it. It's hollow. You cut a hole so that the coins can be slipped into it. The idea is to create a sphere-like object. It doesn't have to be a piggy bank, but it can be. You can see this little bear-looking thing. Sphere with all the added parts. Peacock. Again, you can see the sphere, and then all of the parts that were added, the feathers, the beak, the feet as well. So here's another little guy that is a sphere-like object with all the parts added to it. It's a piggy bank with the money slot, and then there was created a little back to plug that up so that they could collect their money and also take it out without having to break it. And then the feet that were added as well. So there's all the additive and subtractive parts to it. So there's a lot of different things that you can do for your double pinch pot. You're going to start by thinking of an object that could be created out of a sphere. This is not a cube project. This is not a pyramid. You're creating a sphere-like object. So start your ideas with a sphere and then add all your parts to it. So to create a double pinch pot, we're going to start with two pinch pots of the same size. So to do that, I will get a big chunk of clay, cut it into two parts that are balls, and then create those smooth balls. And then I will create two pinch pots out of them. And then I check to make sure, are they the same size? When I put them together, is it about the same size for that sphere to go together? And then I have that double pinch pot. So I'm going to start with the first one. And I'm going to take my container of slip and a scoring tool. And I'm going to score first this edge. So this was already flattened out. I'm just going to go back and score that edge. And I want that to be pretty chewed up. I'm going to set that aside, and I'm going to do the same to this pinch pot where I score this edge. And I kind of go back and forth to make sure that it's nice and chewed up. So now that I have scored both sides, I'm going to then go through and apply a little bit of slip. So I just kind of slide that across with my finger onto both sides. And this is why I want this to be nice and flat so that I can put that together. If there are any bumps, I'm going to trap air. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to slip this side as well. And I want a good amount of slip there. I don't need a lot of chunks. I'm just going to kind of wipe that edge so that it's easier to clean up after. Get any of that extra that I wiped on there. Okay, now I'm going to take these. I've slipped and scored them together. I'm going to take it and put it together, and I'm going to marry those together. So now that they are pushed together, I'm just going to kind of squeeze them together carefully and bring those sides together. So I'm going to have this little seam here, and I'm just going to kind of slide them together with my thumbs to get rid of as much excess seam as I can. Making sure that I squish that together. Now what I've created is a balloon. So there's all this trapped air, and this could slide off. and I can't really work with it because it's still pretty soft. So I'm going to set this aside for a minute, and I'm going to get some excess clay, and I'm going to take and roll out, I'm going to roll out a coil. And now I'm going to take this coil and I'm going to set it on the seam. I'm going to press down with my thumb, and I'm going to keep pressing that into the seam all the way around that sphere I've created so that I can put slip. Now that excess slip that was in that seam is creating a bond with this coil. So I've gone all the way around, rip that excess off, and now I've got this coil band around that sphere that's kind of sealing that up. So if there was any parts to it that I was worried about, I don't have to. Now, after I've created that coil all the way around, I want that smoothed out. So I'm going to take my thumb and I'm just going to kind of slide it across the one side and smooth the one side off. So I've gone through and I've smoothed the one side into the one side of the thing, and then I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to smooth that out on the other side. Now this side's going to have a lot more excess, so I'm just going to wipe it off onto my table here and keep smoothing that in. So then I go through and get off any extra little bits of clay that isn't quite smoothed out. And you can see it's not quite perfectly round, and that's okay. I have a sphere, I've sealed in that air to create my balloon. Now this is where I can go through and I can start paddling it because I've got that air. When I kind of paddle it with my hand or pat, that's going to reshape this. And as I push down, it's going to push air out the other and it's going to reshape it. So now I can go back and paddle that into a better sphere. It gets rid of some of the bumps. It will reset that seam a little bit. If the seam starts to show up, just kind of paddle it out. I'm going to, at this point, decide, do I want a sphere shape? Do I want more of an egg shape? So if I want to shape it into an egg, you can see that's more of a long. I can leave it like this as an egg, or I can go in and even more. I can pinhead that top out, just shaping that into the shape that I want. To store, I don't want to leave it on the table like this, otherwise gravity will drop it down and I'll end up with a flat bottom. And at this point I don't want anything to go flat yet. I want to keep it nice and round because I want it to go leather hard. So I'm going to set this aside for a second. I'm going to take a big chunk of clay and I'm going to create a big coil. I'm going to pull that together, and this doesn't have to be pretty, it just needs to be something for this to sit on. I'm going to kind of tap it to make it flat, and now I can store my sphere onto a coil. Now before you store it in your bag, you want to make sure that air can get in. If I keep this sealed, that air inside has moisture in it, and it's going to want to get out. So what I need to do is take a needle tool, and I'm going to poke a hole on this side and another hole on this side so that air can get in and out, and that's going to keep this from cracking. When I'm ready to start building, and this is leather hard, I can go through and just kind of smooth that hole out again so that it doesn't, and then I can cut a hole at the end. So for storing on a board, I'm going to set that on the board and put it in a bag. When putting it into the bag, it's easiest if I take my bag, squirt a little bit of water in it, put my board in first, and then slip this onto the board and pull the bag over. If I try to move it on, it's a lot more difficult and it rolls. When walking to your shelf, it's a lot easier to hold with one hand. Otherwise, it could roll off and then you end up having to start over. So there's the double pinch bot.